All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hey everybody, it is the Mark Thompson Show. Mark is not here, but Albert and I are here. Hey Albert.
Good morning, Kim.
Good morning to you. The reason Mark Thompson is not here, some of you may know and some may not have heard yesterday, is that on Monday night, Mark Thompson's dad passed away at the age of 93. So he is back with his family, and the new timetable for him returning is going to be next Wednesday. So Mark will be back on Wednesday. Until then, here we are, keeping the show going, keeping it rolling. There was another death I saw today. Donald Sutherland died at the age of 88. So we'll talk about that. We also have an author, Scott Ryan, on the show to talk about the last days of the David Letterman show. So that should be really fun. Plus, it's David Katz Day today. So we always love to talk to David Katz, especially because of this case out of Louisiana. I don't know if you saw this story yesterday. They want to make the 10 Commandments visible in all classrooms, including public school classrooms. So already a lawsuit's popping up about that, and I can't wait to hear David Katz's legal analysis of that whole situation. So thank you for hanging out with us on the Mark Thompson Show. Please click the like button if you haven't already. We appreciate it.
Iron rod.
Oh, and smash it good. And if you haven't subscribed, we're trying to get to 35,000 subscribers. And I don't know what our current tally is, Albert. It would be nice.
We're at 34,800 in that area.
Just a couple hundred more. So if you could click the subscribe button, share the show, help us get a few more subscribers. That might be a nice gift for Mark when he gets back to have a 35,000 mark reached. I'd love it. All right.
That would be great. I'd love
Wouldn't
that too.
Be? Yeah. Also, the show is crowdfunded, and so we count on your support, and thank you to everyone who steps up and helps us out. You can find more information at themarkthompsonshow.com. You can see it there rolling on the bottom of the screen, themarkthompsonshow.com. What you'll find there is not only the link to the Mark merch and podcasts, but you'll find the Patreon link and the PayPal link and all the information on how to support the show. Plus, super chats and super stickers are open now during the live show, and you can also leave them during the recorded shows as well. So thank you for all the ways you support the show. Let us dig in to the stories of the day. First of all,
The Mark Thompson Show.
The death of Donald Sutherland. I just learned this morning that this amazing actor has passed away at the age of 88. His son, Kiefer Sutherland, announced his death on X. He said, "With a heavy heart, I tell you that my father, Donald Sutherland, has passed away." He said, "I personally think he was one of the most important actors in the history of film. Never daunted by a role, good, bad, or ugly, he loved what he did, and he did what he loved. And one can never ask for more than that." He said, "A life well lived." So Donald Sutherland, 60 years in Hollywood and movies, got a start in TV, and he was in what? The Dirty Dozen? He was in MASH, Clute, Ordinary People, even The Hunger Games. So yeah. He got an honorary Oscar in 2017, and he is survived by his wife, his 5 children, and his 4 grandchildren. So we say goodbye today to Donald Sutherland. Let's move to the story. I saw this a couple days ago, and I don't know, Albert, if you know about legacy admissions, when, your grandfather, your mother, your aunt, your cousin have gone to a certain university, you have a familial history, then you have a legacy at that school, and sometimes that counts for your admission, right? So if you have a family history at the school, you're kind of an easy in, especially if you're rich as well. And it could follow that if you're more wealthy, more of your members of your family have gone to certain colleges. Well, they're trying to get rid of legacy admissions. And in California, the legacy admission thing has been banned at the University of California system. But the state of California is looking at legislation that would ban legacy admissions even from private schools, private colleges and universities here in California as well. And if legacy admission is used, these schools could be hit with financial penalties. So this is new legislation that includes Stanford University, USC. These are schools that have often, from what I understand, given preference to the children of alumni and donors. This bill is clearing the state assembly for the first time. It's yesterday went to the Senate Education Committee. So I don't know. It looks like it's got wide support. Do you think that legacy should be included in admission?
I mean, maybe if they did a lot for the university, maybe they could make an exception, but I don't know if just giving it out that open. I know in golf, Tiger Woods was received special PGA Tour exemption. He has over 80 wins, and he's done a lot for the PGA. And a lot of times you need sponsors or need to qualify to play in these tournaments, but they gave him a little thing. So if you're like the Tiger Woods of your campus, maybe you could give you like that special treatment.
Well, right now, as it stands, more than 13% of students admitted to USC and Santa Clara University and Stanford, 13%, were related to alumni. And that is according to numbers that the schools had to report under past legislation. No positions taken thus far by USC on Stanford on this legislation, on whether they support it. But what I can say is that Governor Gavin Newsom is an alumnus of Santa Clara. And so whether or not he would support that bill, we'll see. We'll see.
I'm sure Lori Loughlin would have. It's not surprising because of the whole USC thing that she had going on with her daughters and the admission scandal.
Let's turn to politics because we had this story about the presidential debate, which is coming up. And President Biden and Trump are trying to prepare for this debate. And it's being called by CNN a moment of consequence, which is interesting because I've heard other people say this debate doesn't really matter, that we know who these candidates are. And so, it's a debate. It's not going to win or lose the election. And now I'm seeing a moment of high consequence. So what do you think? I mean, do you think this is going to really affect the person you vote for? If President Biden does poorly in this debate, does that mean you're going to vote for Trump? I don't know.
It is an opportunity for Biden to, because Trump is really good in those situations. So if Biden has a good showing, I don't know what it will do for like the middle, the fringe voters, but I don't see the benefit.
I think Trump can be, and I'm thinking back to the debate with Hillary Clinton, intimidating and aggressive. And I don't know if that's what we want to see in a president. I mean, perhaps that's what people want to see, but I'd rather see someone is speaking clearly, thoughtful, smart. Their answers are, making sense to me, that type of thing. I don't know. What I do know is that according to CNN, they say both sides are going to try to paint the other side as unfit to lead. They're going to trot out the age card. They're going to talk about memories, and they're going to talk about, whether you are cognitively impaired and all of these things. I think it's just going to be a put down festival. So, and we know that the election is going to be an ugly one. And already even Democrats getting really ugly with it as far as billboards against Trump and saying negative things about his memory. It's kind of, it's the mudslinging has begun from both sides on this one. And so
it feels very wrestling.
It
I watch a lot
does.
of wrestling. It feels like they're just running a promo, and they're both doing. And Donald Trump has been on wrestling, and I've seen what he could do. So it seems like wrestling, but Biden does have a lot of. I hate to find I need to find a better word, ammunition against Trump. So with everything that's been going on with him, so maybe that'll be I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out when the debate comes around.
Well, you say that it's wrestling, which I think is completely true. And I was reading this article in Politico, and they call it scorched earth summer. That these candidates now running for office in the U.S. and in the U.K. are going, and in France as well, are going on the negative. And the message from President Biden when he spoke last weekend about the possibility of Trump making Supreme Court appointments, he called it one of the scariest parts of the Republicans' potential return to office. They put up this billboard. This is a billboard put up by the Democratic National Committee referring to Donald Trump as a felon. Here's what it says. Trump already attacked Arizona's democracy once. Now he's back as a convicted felon, all in caps. He's out for revenge and retribution. Trump, unfit to serve. There it is. I mean, all of this is, in my mind, true. But you look at this billboard, and this is the mudslinging. This is the negative campaigning. I would rather see, and I know this is what gets people's attention, and I know this is what people are, looking at, but I would rather see policies. I would rather see, President Biden is backing your reproductive rights, a positive message about what he's planning to do instead of a negative message about someone else. But because he knows that Trump is going to be negative, he has to be negative as well. And so these are the types of billboards and advertisements, and I would imagine campaign commercials that we're going to be seeing, maybe not as much in California because we're kind of a silly place to spend money for the Democrats. We're a done deal. But in other places, this is the message. This is the message. This is why people hate election season, because it kind of drags you down with negativity.
And this kind of like the whole campaign, like they like to rally around stuff like this. This is like buying into the whatever Trump it likes to do. So he likes to call them crazy. They're like, look, they're trying to take me down here. It's exactly on par, and they're like aiding his, like they're strengthening. I guess they're strengthening the Trump side, but I don't know if what this does to fringe voters.
Well, here's the thing. You look at the way Republicans have acted with, not allowing Merrick Garland to become a Supreme Court justice and other things they've done where they've said one thing and they've turned around and done something that has, been damaging to Democrats. And you see the way they play, which is this underhanded kind of ugly, no holds barred kind of situation. And then you see Democrats still trying to maintain some sense of dignity. And you realize if they don't play by the same rules, if they don't lower themselves, it was Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go high. Well, that doesn't always work, because when they go low, sometimes you got to go low too. And I hate to say it because it's not in my nature, but if you don't fight dirty the same way they do, then you're on the losing side of the election. And so that's what's happening. Now the Biden administration has got to put up these billboards like this because they have to match the ugliness of the other side. That's the way I see it. Now you could say, oh, this is always the way it is. There's always negativity and mudslinging and digging up of dirt from either side type of thing. And maybe that's true, but it just feels like the reason for this billboard is because of the ugliness of Trump. Because they know this is the way they have to play. They got to get dirty. They have to. Otherwise, the election's a goner. Yeah.
We had, about going back to the debate, Heather Kennedy's asking, are they going to get a moderator who will actually keep things under control?
Well, what we know is that they have yes, I think so, but they also have agreed to the microphone dump, right? Or the microphone mute. So if Trump goes off on a tangent, mute. President Biden might be able to hear it on stage, but we won't be able to hear it. We'll see his mouth moving and we won't see anything coming out. And same thing if President Biden tries to interrupt former President Trump. Mic mute. Now, will they employ those tactics? It seems to me disrespectful to use the mute right away. I think you would have to warn the president, especially the president, right? Okay, we agreed to these rules. This is the way it is. If you continue to speak, we will have to mute your microphone. How you say that to a sitting president? I'd be the worst person to moderate one of these events. But yeah, so I'm hoping the mic mute will make a big difference, because in the past it's just been a shouting fest, and then you get no information, right? Nothing. They're just yelling at each other the whole time, and it's stressful for everyone watching. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that they do that. So, but you know that the elections around the world are scooping down to this negativity as well. They're in France. The president, Emmanuel Macron, is saying that far left candidates will inflict impoverishment on the country. In the UK, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has this all negative campaign against the Labour Party. So it's kind of this right now, this political trend, I guess. This is what we're doing this time around, where we're fighting to the, down to the gutter in these elections. Yeah. I saw, and Mark actually messaged me this story about
The Mark Thompson Show.
About Fox News, and Trump kind of lost it on Fox News. Now, most of us have known for a long time that Fox News isn't really news, right? That this isn't where you turn if you want facts. But now Donald Trump is bashing Fox News, saying no one can trust its reporting. Well, finally, sir, you're on board. This is excellent. He has kind of been hot and cold with Fox News. It depends on, are they favorable to him today or not, apparently. But they think this is in response to former House Speaker Paul Ryan's appearance on the network. Ryan comes on and says Trump is unfit for office, and it was on their air. And he said, Trump says, no one can ever trust Fox News, and I am one of them. With the weak and ineffective rhino, Paul Ryan, on its board of directors, the presumed GOP nominee for president wrote, using an acronym for the Republican in name only. He said he's a total lightweight, a failed, pathetic Speaker of the House, a very disloyal person. And then he goes off on Fox News. It's just, one negative thing can set him off. It's absolutely nuts. Speaking of Fox, though, they do these periodic presidential polls. And in the most recent poll, President Biden was ahead of former President Trump. And I don't think they liked that. But the poll showed that President Biden is leading 50-48, which they say is within the margin of error. They talk about Trump falling with a 5-point Trump lead in March to a 1-point lead last month, and now President Biden ahead with a 2-point lead. And then they didn't really mention it again. They didn't really want to talk about it. Usually they hit this pretty hard, but apparently, it wasn't going over very well. So they had some panelists on, and they talked about, isn't it interesting? This man from the Washington Times, his name is Charles Hurt. And when they talked about what is motivating voters, he said, he kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, meh. When they asked him, are Americans motivated by a perceived threat to democracy? He went, at the end of the day, these elections don't usually turn on amorphous things like the future of democracy. What? He said elections turn on things that really matter. Are you telling me the future of democracy doesn't really matter? He said the economy, the border, issues where Trump has more of an advantage. Okay, sure. It's interesting how important the polls are when Trump is ahead on Fox, and how much they don't really matter when President Biden is ahead by a couple of points. But again, all within the margin of error. All right, Albert, let's do a little bit of news now, and then we'll get to our first guest, who is Scott Ryan, author of, we had him on recently about his book about the movies in the 90s. I was reading more about him, and he has a bunch of other books that he's written, one of them about David Letterman. So we'll talk to him about that right after the news here on The Mark Thompson Show.
Let me get this.
It's coming. There.
The Mark Thompson Show.
That's right. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards. The U.S. Supreme Court still has some more major decisions to hand down before it's expected to recess this month, likely to issue some of these opinions today and tomorrow. Among them, a ruling on former President Trump's claim that he's immune from prosecution for alleged crimes committed while in office. Other looming decisions, cases on the obstruction charges against the January 6th Capitol rioters and abortion access in medical emergencies. The Supreme Court is, though, upholding a Trump-era tax on foreign investments. The 2017 law, backed by Republicans, actually had support from the Biden administration as well. A rare moment of agreement. Look at that. It was meant to stop Americans shielding foreign earnings from U.S. taxes and to help finance Trump's sweeping tax cuts. Speaking of the debate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will not be on that debate stage alongside President Biden and Donald Trump next week. The independent presidential candidate failed to qualify for the June 27th debate hosted by CNN in Atlanta. Kennedy did not hit CNN's polling threshold of 15% in at least 4 approved national polls. And Kennedy's campaign has filed a Federal Election Commission complaint against CNN and the Biden and the Trump campaigns as well. He is not happy that he is not being included in this debate. Senate Democrats continuing their push for reproductive rights. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying he plans to put legislation to reestablish a national right to abortion on the floor very soon. The vote will coincide with the second, if you want to call it an anniversary, of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. White House reportedly canceled a high-level meeting with Israeli officials on Iran that was scheduled for today. Axios reporting this move was in response to a video posted by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in which he claimed the United States is withholding military aid. President Biden's top advisors were reportedly enraged by this video. Some Israeli officials were already en route to Washington, D.C. when this big meeting was called off. A ceremony honoring the great Willie Mays taking place before the MLB at Rickwood Field game tonight in Alabama. A Hall of Famer passed away this week at the age of 93. The special game will see the San Francisco Giants take on the St. Louis Cardinals at the oldest professional ballpark in the United States. And again, this report is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards, and today we have a very special video from Rich and Nancy out at the winery in Livermore. Let's check it out.
Mark Thompson, Kim, Albert, Tony, Rich and Nancy over here at Tenuta. 20 years ago, the movie Sideways was released, 2004. That film put Nancy Tenuta on the map. I'm standing in front of our 5 acres of estate-grown Pinot Noir. The reason the movie put Nancy on the map, 20 years ago, she was the only winery in the Livermore Valley with estate-grown Pinot Noir. All the other wineries that had Pinot at that time outsourced it to Napa, Sonoma, Lodi, Santa Cruz, Monterey. So the movie was a big hit, as you know, all about drinking Pinot and all about not drinking Merlot. But anyways, the reason I'm sending this video is we just released our 2020 estate-grown Pinot Noir. So come into the tasting room or order it online or through me, 925-699-4576. And of course, the Mark Thompson, Why Are You Yelling Red Blend, and hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson Pinot Grigio? Selling like hotcakes, you guys. So call me, order now, and enjoy your summer. We hope to see you out here at Tenuta. We are open July 4th weekend. Talk to you soon.
They're so cool. He is such a good guy. And he's had a bit of a rough year with some health challenges and some other stuff going on, and he still has this positive attitude.
I'd be willing to bet my lunch that there's alcohol involved.
Oh, there's alcohol involved. You can get the 10% Mark Thompson Show discount by writing or saying "smash it with your iron rod."
With your iron rod.
All you need to do is email rich@tenudavineyards.com, rich@tenuta, TENUTA vineyard.com, or you can call. The number again is 925-699-4576. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
What he's got going here is a situation.
It's unbelievably offensive.
Put up your pants, my man. Pull up those pants.
Ralph Nader just sent me a book. Did he send you one too?
I offer this sincere apology to you today.
Everything is going extremely well.
Calling me a liar? Now what do you call me?
You, sir, are a liar.
You are a cover-up artist, and you are a liar.
Liar, liar, your pants are on fire!
A Google told me.
Can you let him finish, sir? It was wrong, it was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
No, no, no.
I'm going to tell you what I think.
What are the porn stars doing?
Do you have a secret now?
Isn't anybody but a weed?
100% effective. How about that?
Say what?
And this is their new host.
There is no defense for my conduct.
I misspoke. I stand corrected.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
Time's up, mother effers.
So excited. You may remember the interview with author Scott Ryan, which is really hard for me to not say Ryan Scott. I don't know if you guys from old KGO days remember our celebrity chef, Ryan Scott. I got so used to saying that. We're flipping around. This is author Scott Ryan, and we had him on the show recently to talk about his newer book, which is all about movies in the 90s. Great conversation. And I liked him so much that I started kind of looking at what else he's written and what else he's done. And I saw something that really piqued my interest. So I wanted to have him back on to talk about another book that he's written about the final days of the David Letterman show. Please help me welcome Scott Ryan, everybody. Hi.
Thanks for having me back. And, you know, a lot of people do call me Ryan Scott, and I'll answer to anything.
Okay.
Dude, buddy, or Ryan, or Scott. Whatever you got, I'll respond to.
If I call you Ryan Scott, it's because I have said that name so many times but I'm trying really. I have it in big caps. I flipped it around, so I shouldn't make the mistake.
I'll answer to anything, McAllister, Kim.
Thank you. And thank you for coming on the show again and short notice as well. I really, really appreciate you being here. And I'm excited about this book, which it's old news to you, but it's new to me. And it's all about David Letterman, not the entire length of his show and the history of it, but really just kind of how the show ended.
Yeah, it's the final 6 weeks of the show. I cover every episode, and I think it's the greatest run of any talk show ever. And it was such a work of art. I just didn't want people to forget about it. And I was lucky enough to interview his staff, the writers, directors, producers, which was incredible because most of them had never given an interview in their life before.
Wow. And so, you know, sometimes you interview people, at least it seems like on most recent talk shows, that staff members are disgruntled and they're pissed off and they're not being treated well.
And I'm...
Oh, Kim, I think your connection dropped a little bit. You're in the middle of your question.
I'm so sorry. I was saying, sometimes it happens to me. I'm sorry. I was saying, so sometimes recently in some talk show hosts, their staff has been disgruntled, and maybe they think the talk show host is kind of diva-like. Is that the impression that you got when you interviewed the staff members?
No, not at all. The exact opposite. And especially because Dave has this reputation, or had it back then, especially, that he was grumpy and cold and things like that. That was not the case at all. These were people that had worked with him, some of them for 30 years, like Barbara Gaines, the executive producer, had been with him the entire time. And you have to remember, he announced that he was going to retire a year early. So all of this staff knew they were fired in 1 year. Mm-hmm. And they could have jumped ship. They could have gone to The Tonight Show. They could have gone to The Daily Show or The View or wherever. And no one wanted to quit. They all stuck it through to the end. And I thought, the book sort of has two purposes. It captures the celebrities that came on and how that happened. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. But what's really interesting is the loyalty of these people, which is basically a small business that's shutting down.
One of the things I've noticed when watching Letterman in replay and reruns and, little clips here on YouTube is that some of his interviews don't necessarily stand the test of time. We may see a little bit of, I don't know, sexual joking, things that were acceptable back then or passed as comedy back then, or now maybe seem a little skeevy.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on that. I don't think that's true. There was a thing that came out, I think it was with Lindsay Lohan, and he got some bad press, but the person edited the clip. It wasn't true. It was something that caught, and they took out the parts where Dave was complimenting her, and they just edited it.
Sure.
So you have to sort of judge with what you're seeing.
Right.
When you went on the Letterman show, it's hard to explain how different TV is now because everything is sanitized. You got back from Dave what you gave. So if you came on there and sort of had an attitude, yes, Dave was going to eat you alive. And I suppose in today's society, people would say that was mean, but then don't come at the king unless you're going to take him down. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
The famous one with that was certainly Joaquin Phoenix, mm-hmm. where he came on and Dave just ate him alive. And that was what was great.
Oh, that's cute. Him and George Clooney. So the days that you cover, where you look at who he had on the show, as at the run up to the end of the show, were these all the most loyal, the most fun that he's had on the show with the celebrities in the past that they brought back to close out the show, or how did they decide who to have on?
Well, I mean, they said it was so difficult because everyone wanted to come on. And so there were a lot of really famous walk-ons, like Cher just does a quick walk-on during a monologue. And, when Cher is getting told, we don't have room for you, you realize some big celebrities came.
Yeah.
George Clooney did a great bit, as you can see in the picture that they're showing. He's handcuffed to Dave. So he came out and he handcuffed himself to Dave to say that he wasn't going to let Dave leave, and he does the entire show in handcuffs. Even when the next guest came out, which was musician Tom Waits, George Clooney sits behind Dave, still handcuffed to him throughout that. The way Letterman used to film is on Thursday they would film two shows. They would film Thursday's show and Friday. They'd film them back to back. So what they did was they just had George Clooney stay, and he came out again in the opening monologue, still handcuffed to Dave. And it looked as if it happened overnight when really it was,
sure,
just an hour in between. But it was a fun bit. And then they had Paul Schaefer get some metal choppers, and they chopped the handcuffs off. Well, Brian Teta, he was a segment producer on Letterman. Now he's the executive producer of The View. It was his idea to do the chopping thing, and they they didn't practice. There was no time to practice. They're in between. And he said he was backstage just sweating, thinking, what if this doesn't work? What if Paul can't do it? What if he cuts off George Clooney's pinky?
Oh, God.
But it worked, and it was fine, and it's a great little bit. Those were the inspired moments that they were having during the final 6 weeks.
They also, I was reading, you said they had the Foo Fighters on, and I bet it was kind of a battle for, you say they didn't have room for Cher. So how do they go ahead and pick, what musicians to showcase?
So Dave actually picked all the musical performances. And one of the things I write about in the book is, Dave is not the kind of person that's going to express his feelings on air, but he actually does do it with the songs that are played. So if you listen to the music, you'll really learn how he felt about this. And he wanted the Foo Fighters to close out the show with the song Evermore. So he told the producer, get me Foo Fighters. Well, they were not going to be around. They were in Africa or somewhere very far away. And they canceled their show and flew back just to perform.
Wow.
They're the last musical guest. And they're not even shown on camera, because they did a montage of all the clips from the 30 years. So the music producer, Cheryl Zelikon, I think her name was, although I'm sure I butchered that last name, she told me she had to call the Foo Fighters and say, come back from another country, cancel your show, be on air, and you're not going to be on camera.
And they did it. And they did it.
And they did it. That's how much they loved Dave. And Dave says all the time that was his favorite band, was the Foo Fighters.
Oh, that's so cool. I had no idea that it was the songs that were important to him. What other musical guests did he have on toward the end?
Well, one that really meant the most to me was Norah Jones. I say unabashedly in the book that Dave was my TV friend. I started watching him in high school, and it was sort of like my hour. Throughout my whole life, whatever I was doing, I watched Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Other people have soap operas or sports or whatever you have. For me, it was watching Letterman.
Yeah.
And when he had Norah Jones on, when he introduced her, he said to Paul, this is the first song she ever sang on our show. We asked her to come back and sing it again 15 to 17 years later. And she performed Don't Know Why, her big hit, in a really slowed down jazz performance of the classic hit, Don't Know Why I Didn't Come. And when I watched it, I just started crying. I feel we're close enough, I can admit this. I just started to cry because I realized I had every Norah Jones album.
Yeah.
And she had her television debut on Letterman. That's where I learned about her. And I was like, where am I going to get my music from? He was cultivating these artists throughout the years. And they did a lot of that, where they brought Hootie and the Blowfish back to perform one more time. And then you realized how long he had been on TV and how much music really mattered to the Letterman show.
Do you feel like, and this is, I know, a personal opinion, do you feel like the talk shows that we have now, in your eyes, hold a candle to what Letterman gave us?
No, they don't. I mean, not at all. And most of it comes from social media and YouTube. I mean, that's why people like Jimmy Fallon and James Corden, and then a little bit more with Seth Meyers with Closer Look, they have these bits that are just made to shoot out on YouTube and for you to watch carpool karaoke, or when Jimmy Fallon does the singing and dancing with people.
Which I like.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with liking it. I mean, it's fun. It's a fun thing to watch real quick at a stoplight.
Right.
But, with Dave, it was about that whole hour. There was an episode one time where he wanted to hear an Eagles song. And so he said to Paul, play me an Eagles song. And Paul's like, I can't. And he's like, why? And he's like, because as a band, they said we're never allowed to play them.
Oh.
And so Dave's like, well, what will happen? And the whole hour, they just keep coming back. He's like, did the lawyers say we can play it? And they're calling people, and all the people in the control booth are trying to find someone. Can they play an Eagles song?
Which is probably, they're not really calling anybody. It's just a whole bit, right?
Well, no, I mean, Dave really would expect it. I interviewed the director of him, and he would say Dave would plan the show and then immediately throw it out to make everyone behind the stage
go crazy, run around,
scramble at the say like, I want hamburgers for everyone in the audience. And then by the end of the show, they're passing out hamburgers. That kind of loose play, that's not a YouTube clip, because he's bringing it up every commercial and he's talking about it with the guests that come out. And that looseness of television really came from Johnny Carson, which comes from Steve Allen, and it keeps going back. That was television that was broadcast. We don't really do that now. Now, we don't want to say anything bad about the Eagles because they're afraid someone's going to get sued and they want to get that song. And it was just for fun. You know what I mean? There wasn't bad intentions. It was just fun.
It's funny what you just said about David.
Sorry, Kim, your connection.
Usually I'm back like within 2 seconds. I'm sorry.
You're back. Yeah, you're back.
But I'm glad you're here, Albert, because I was saying that what he was describing, what Scott's describing about David Letterman kind of making everybody scramble before the show and making the show better in that way is kind of what we go through with Mark Thompson. Because he does the same thing where right before the show, he'll say, I just saw this story and I want this and let's do that. And so it's the same kind of thing, but it also, it increases the energy of the show and makes everything fresh and fun. And you never know what's going to happen. So
that's what people are tuning in. I have to be honest with you. When I was a guest for my Decade of Cinema book, I was talking about Reality Bites, and lo and behold, if you guys didn't pop up a picture of Reality Bites out of nowhere, and I thought, how did they do that? And that's impressive, especially because this show is live. You're not editing it.
That's right.
When a viewer knows that something could go wrong, and it's not like we want to see it go wrong, but you want to see the electricity of can it happen? And that's what Letterman was all about. Is he going to go out on the streets of New York? I love Stephen Colbert. He replaced Letterman. But I mean, how many times do we see Stephen Colbert just walk out that door? He's right on Broadway. I personally have never seen him do it.
No.
Dave was always walking out, interacting with people out there, bringing him in and bringing that level of danger. And it's why you wanted to stay up and watch it live so you could talk about it. I mean, is it as fun to share a YouTube video? I don't know.
Yeah. I also really like Craig Ferguson a lot. I was sad when he left. He had this thing where he kind of, he would get really close to the camera, almost like, he had this personal connection with the viewer that was watching. And I've never seen anyone else do that quite as well.
Yeah, Craig was a special person as well. I actually liked Tom Snyder. That was, I think, 2 before him, because I guess it was Craig Kilborn before Craig Ferguson. And also, didn't Ferguson have like a skeleton that would talk?
Yeah, that's Jeff. Jeff the robot. Yeah. We have Jeff on the show a lot.
Does he say much?
What now?
I bet you he doesn't freak out when you freeze, huh?
Nope, he doesn't. He just takes it in stride. Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, I don't know. I've been having this freezing problem where I freeze and then 2 seconds later I'm back. So I don't know what's happening with me. But back to David Letterman. Nowadays, and I don't know if he's still doing it, but then he started putting out these kind of one-on-one special videos that he would do, and they're really good.
Yeah, it's called My Next Guest. And he just released one with Miley Cyrus. It's on Netflix. It just came out, I think, this Wednesday. And I watched it. It's so good. I'm not against or for Miley Cyrus. I like her, but she obviously wasn't my age group. I don't know a Hannah Montana from a Hannah, Idaho. But look at that. They've got the Miley Cyrus picture up. I didn't tell him I was going to mention it.
Nope. That's my friend Albert. He's on it. Yep.
They got it. And it's a great interview. It made me like Miley Cyrus. It made me actually go out and sample her music, because I learned a lot about her. And anyone who's even half interested in her, I suggest watching it. It's really, really a good interview. Dave is a spectacular interviewer.
He really is. Kind of puts people at ease with his humor, and yet is very, very prepared and knows it. But you wouldn't think that, right?
Well,
because it seems like more of a conversation and less of here's a bullet list of questions I want to ask you. It flows.
Yeah, and he also used to have scientists on all the time and was very interested in global warming way before That was the thing. Always had things on solar power. And again, this is way back in the day. I mean, I learned a lot. I don't think those guests are really being booked on late night television anymore.
No.
It's just who has a movie? How can we, what network am I on? I'm just pushing the network TV shows, which Dave had to do, but he always did it a little smarmy. And that could be why, as you're saying, when you watch some of these clips, it seems shocking, but like, if you came from my generation, I'm Gen X, like you love that, like bite the hand that feeds you. Like I'm still doing it.
That's awesome. Any other interesting stories pop up when you're doing all these interviews?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most moving part of those last 6 weeks was Norm Macdonald. He was the last stand-up to do comedy on The Late Show. And it is an incredible performance. I mean, every single person I interviewed, and like I said, I even interviewed the lady who ran the HR department. They all singled out Norm Macdonald's last appearance as their favorite. His stand-up routine is spectacular, but then he actually breaks down crying at the end when he pays tribute to Dave. And, how many times do you see a stand-up comic actually be moved to tears? Because he does Dave's first bit he ever heard to end his set. And it's really moving. And it kind of, you can see Dave is like shocked by this because Norm Macdonald was not the most warm, and cuddly comedian. That wasn't his bit. But it really is something. If you're going to YouTube anything, YouTube Norm's last stand-up routine. It's incredible.
What were some
of my favorite moments?
Here I am again. I'm sorry. What were some of your very favorite segments on the Letterman show?
Well, I'll tell you, I loved when Dave told a story.
Mm-hmm.
So his desk piece, they wrote a comedy piece and he would be doing whatever, the CBS mailbag or Will It Float or dropping things off the top of the building.
I loved that.
Got all ready to go. And then Dave is going to tell a story from his life, getting a speeding ticket, or if he's just going to talk about someone in the audience. Those were my favorite moments because that's when you just see how naturally funny Dave was. And it sort of shaped me as a storyteller and connecting what happened off screen. When I do a performance like this, if we can call what I'm doing here a performance, I love to listen to what happens right before.
Yeah.
And then I usually, if I'm on the radio, then I mention something that came in, because then you have that nexus with the host that lets them know you were paying attention.
Absolutely.
I learned all of that from Dave. How to do that, how to make a moment with your audience.
Mm-hmm.
Even if everyone doesn't get it, people might not have been listening to the guest before me and they're not know why I'm saying that, but I love to do that.
Yeah. I love you for coming on the show, and your book, I saw it last night on Amazon. Is that the preferred place to purchase it, or is there another place you'd like people to check it out?
Well, you can never tell people not to give Jeff Bezos money. That's what Americans like to do best. But if you're just sick of giving him your money, you can go to my website, which is tuckerdspress.com, and I can sign the books for you there. I have The Last Days of Letterman and The Last Decade of Cinema just came out this week. That's my 90s book that I talked about before. And now I feel bad. I did The Last Decade, The Last Days. I didn't know I did that. There's actually 10 years between these books.
Yeah.
I should have said The Final Decade of Cinema.
No, I think you have a theme going. Now you can't stop it. Now, you're the last guy, right?
Okay, yeah.
That's your shtick now.
That's my shtick. It's the last. I'm going to do The Last Piece of Pie next.
That's it. The Last Piece of Pie. The last television show. The Last Days of Seinfeld. I'm sure we can come up with a million of them.
Yeah, we'll just keep going. Get the last guy.
That's really, really cool. Thank you for being on the show and for coming on and talking about Letterman. I learned a lot that I didn't know about the show, and I'm really grateful.
I really appreciate you having me back on. And, it was always fun when Dave would bring Amy Sedaris on as her fill-in. So I want to think I'm the Amy Sedaris of the Mark Thompson Show.
You have a podcast too, right?
Yes, I have a podcast called It's Our Time with Scott Ryan that I interview people. And then I also have one called Tiger Talk, which is about the Massillon Tigers, which is the high school football team where I interview the coach with my co-host, Becca Moore.
That's fun. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the Mark Thompson Show, and we'll have you back again.
Anytime you need me, I can be here in a second.
Thank you, Scott Ryan.
Thank you.
Bye. Scott Ryan, everybody.
The Mark Thompson Show.
We have former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney, David Katz, coming up on the show next. But first, let's do a little bit of news, and then we'll get to the stories of the law of the day, especially this story, which I can't wait to hear what David Katz has to say about the 10 Commandments now to be placed in all classrooms, even public school classrooms in the state of Louisiana.
There's never been anything like this.
I mean, I thought we had something about the separation of church and state. We'll see if he thinks this is constitutional. I don't know. But first, the news. Again, I'm Kim McAllister, and this is the Mark Thompson Show. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. As mentioned, the ACLU is filing a lawsuit challenging a new Louisiana law that requires the 10 Commandments be displayed in school classrooms. In a statement, the civil rights group says the law violates the separation of church and state and is unconstitutional. That's what I would think. But backers say the Bible verses have historical significance. Back in the 80s, the Supreme Court struck down a similar law in Kentucky, saying it had no secular purpose. Different court. We'll see what the decision will be. A Juneteenth celebration in Oakland erupted into violence. Police say at least 4 people were shot, several others injured during the celebration at Lake Merritt on Wednesday night. There were about 5,000 people attending this Juneteenth event. Police say a fight broke out before the shooting. Several blocks in the area were closed off while police investigate this whole thing. Inflation will reportedly outpace take-home pay for the next few years. New research from MoneyWise found 97% of job pay failed to keep up with inflation over the last 5 years. MoneyWise also noting home prices have jumped by an average of 56% in that time period. Looks like California's summer wave of COVID started early this year. Emergency room visits are up nearly 9%. The rate of those testing positive up 6%, 3 times that level since last month. Health officials warn those who've already recovered from the virus may be reinfected as new variants spread as well. The state of California is showing 1 of 6 with high levels of COVID in the wastewater. So this is the wastewater numbers, with the most in the San Francisco Bay Area. As wildfires really burn across the state, the risk of even more is about 100%. That's the word from CAL FIRE. The agency says it's already seen more acres burned in the Northern California unit this week than the last 3 years combined. That's saying something. Their crews are working with a fire in Colusa County, which has now become the biggest, topping 19,000 acres so far this season. Flames are threatening 326 structures as evacuation orders and warnings remain in place. The second largest fire burning along the Grapevine area in Los Angeles County, holding at almost 1,600 acres. Crews have increased containment to 43%. That's the post-fire burning near Gorman. So at least 43% containment there now. California is holding another tech giant accountable, Snapchat, agreeing to settle a lawsuit from state civil rights officials for $15 million. Some women working at that social media company claimed they were sexually harassed and discriminated against, and then faced retaliation when they spoke up about it. Those employed since 2014 are expected to be compensated. The settlement still needs to be approved by a judge, but $15 million from Snapchat. The California State Fair is lighting up for its 170th anniversary. For the first time ever, people will be allowed to legally smoke pot at the state fair. A cannabis company with 15 dispensaries will have 30,000 square foot lounge for those 21 and older to try products from across the state.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Apparently, they're at the state fair.
Is anybody
Albert.
been a weed?
They can also buy marijuana on site using a virtual shopping basket. This expands on the educational cannabis exhibit and awards competition over the last 2 years. The fair running for 17 days in Sacramento. It starts on June 12th, and now we know you can go and smoke a bitty weed. It is the first day of summer officially, and what better way to celebrate than free ice cream, right? Kroger is giving away 45,000 pints for 15 hours straight. They're doing it to mark the longest day of the year. Yeah. Shoppers apparently find the most Kroger stores in the nation at nearly 300 in California, which is interesting because there are none where I live. But the company also operates them as Ralph's and Food for Less. And if you're looking for your free ice cream, you just need to download a digital coupon, and I guess you're good to go. That's the way to get that done. There's a mistake in a yearbook in New Jersey. An independent investigator is ruling that East Brunswick High School's so-called anti-Semitic yearbook incident was actually a mistake. The investigation was done by Brisbane Law. It concluded earlier this week that the controversy involving a senior yearbook photos were a highly unfortunate error made by a yearbook advisor. Started earlier this month when the Jewish Student Union and members' names were omitted from the high school yearbook and replaced with a photo of Muslim students. Doesn't sound like a mistake to me, but that's what they say. The yearbook has since been corrected, and that's where it stands. They have a big to-do over this iconic Arby's sign in Hollywood, and now the decision has been made that this fast food restaurant in Hollywood, while it's shutting its doors for good after 55 years in operation, Arby's on Sunset Boulevard closed this week. The owner says she's been struggling to keep the place open since the pandemic, but the new $20 per hour minimum wage and other required expenses finally did the restaurant in, and there were all types of people upset about whether the Arby's sign was going away, and it looks like it will remain for now. So they're going to keep that big Arby's roast beef sandwich sign. It's going to stay. And it is a bit of a piece of history. It's been there for 55 years. So even if the Arby's is gone, the sign will remain. An Amazon customer in Indiana says she found a live snake in her Xbox delivery. This woman had recently ordered an Xbox controller in the southern city of Bengaluru, India. She says when she opened the box, there was a live cobra stuck to the packing tape. She shared a video of this package on X earlier this week, claiming she ordered an Xbox controller and got a free snake with it. She also accused Amazon of poor transportation and warehousing hygiene. Amazon said they're looking into the inconvenience, offering to give this woman a refund. A man is in custody in Texas after an attempted sexual assault was interrupted by a family of 5 Taekwondo black belts. This happened Tuesday afternoon just outside Houston when the family that owns and operates the Ying In Dojo heard screams coming from a neighboring business. So the family of 5 runs next door. They see this man assaulting this woman. The family, quick to stop the attack. The father, Taekwondo Grandmaster Hong An, was able to hold the suspects for 10 minutes, the suspects singular, until the police arrived. So, I mean, it pays to put your business right next door to the black belt studio, apparently, the Taekwondo studio. This is great. Can we talk about this beer fire? Yeah, it's kind of like when you see an accident in the Bay Area and the truck carrying freshly bottled wine spills and there's wine all over the roadway. Well, this truck carrying 40,000 pounds of beer went up in flames, causing major traffic hassles in Virginia. The fire started yesterday afternoon on Interstate 95 in Stafford County. Lanes were closed down for a while, miles-long backups. The Virginia Department of Transportation still investigating that fire of the beer truck going up in flames. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I have become, if I don't have this vanilla iced tea somewhere nearby, I start to think I need to go get some. This tea is amazing. I love it. Mark loves the coffee at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Please go to the website, take a look, see if anything piques your interest. And if it does, and you end up with something in your cart, well, you've got a 10% Mark Thompson Show discount, Mark T altogether, no spaces in between, at checkout gets you 10% off at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
I misspoke.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
Why are you yelling?
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this?
We could try ignoring it, sir.
They pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
There's never been anything like this.
We've never seen anything like it before.
Nobody has ever put something like this together that I've ever seen.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
There is nothing in our history that quite compares to this.
I think I'm the most honest human being, perhaps, that God ever created.
God bless America. The end.
Someone did this to spoil our Christmas.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Sayonara, sucker!
You know what? Hal, you created havoc and chaos.
I don't think you should apologize for how you feel.
Do I hit it long? Is Trump strong? Huh?
Who is having that conversation?
Yeah, it is the Mark Thompson Show, and I have been so excited to talk to former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney, all-around amazing guy, David Katz, about this new law in Louisiana. So let's bring him on. David Katz, everybody. Hello.
Hi, great to be with you, Kim.
Great. Yeah, great to have you here. I saw the story yesterday about the state of Louisiana. The governor signed this law into place mandating, requiring that the 10 Commandments be displayed in every public school classroom. They've got to have at least a poster of the 10 Commandments in the classroom. And right away I thought, what about the separation of church and state? This can't be constitutional. But then I started thinking, well, you've got God on the money, right? We've got the God in the national anthem. We've got all kinds of examples and public displays where religion kind of seeps in. What are your thoughts on this case?
Well, there actually is precedent over this sort of decision by states, and they've been struck down by the federal courts, including by the U.S. Supreme Court. No other state has gone this far. Louisiana, I think, and its Republican governor are trying to make a statement. And I think that this decision will be reversed by the federal courts, and it won't stand. You know, people thinking about this might ask themselves, you know, the Quran has huge historical significance. There are rules in the Quran about what it takes to be an observant Muslim. If they were posted in every single public school from first grade to the end of university in every state school in Louisiana, I wonder if all the people who think this is such a great idea in Louisiana would think that's such a great idea. But it would be the same argument that the Quran, instructions are like the 10 Commandments, that they're not only of religious significance, but they're of historical significance, right? There's over 1 billion Muslims in the world. This is historically what for hundreds of years has ideally governed their conduct. I'm hoping to give an example where people would think, no, it's so predominantly religious. It's not something of historical significance. It's different than saying, 1776, 1865, the key dates in American history. That's obviously a different kettle of fish if you had a poster that commemorated key dates in American history. This really, the 10 Commandments, is not American history. It's not world history. It's obviously a predominantly religious expression. And it should be, you can go to religious school, you can go to Sunday school, you can go to, Hebrew school after classes, but to have this displayed in every classroom, I think will be struck down by the courts.
Well, we already know that the day after the law is passed, there's a lawsuit now pending. They're already going for it. And so this is a lawsuit filed by the some group, some type of group. It's let's see. They say the ACLU is suing. In a statement, the civil rights group says the law violates the separation of church and state and is unconstitutional. So, yeah, the Bible verses, according to the backers of this, say they're of historical significance. So, it goes back to what you said. But this is why we have the separation of church and state, because you talk about the Muslim, the laws of the Quran going up on the school walls. I would say if you're going to have the 10 Commandments, then you have to allow the tenets of every religion to go up on the walls.
Be kind of a crowded wall. There wouldn't be room for the ABC. Remember we used to have that?
Yes.
ABC to Z, and they'd have the numbers. There wouldn't be a lot of room for anything else like windows and doors, because there are a lot of religions in the world, and they're all have their free exercise in the United States, but we also don't create a religious preference in the United States. And this is this, and you wonder, doesn't this have any political repercussions? I mean, it costs a lot of money to defend the state of Louisiana. This is a doomed lawsuit. And taxpayers are just going to pay money for this. And I guess it's part of the cultural wars, but they're actually costing money that could be better spent. Louisiana is one of those states. I don't even think that they put in their contribution so that Medicaid can be effectively, pursued there. Like, we pay a lot of money in a state. I think the feds pay 85%. A state only has to pay 15% to have more Medicaid coverage. And some of these states say they won't even spend 15% of their money, although it's matched by 85% federal money, so they can have more coverage for the residents and citizens of those southern states. And yet they spend money on this, which is just symbolic. As I said, I can't imagine this won't get struck down by the courts.
Well, they had to know that someone was going to sue over it. But here's the question I have. Say this type of case, and I don't know if it goes just through the Louisiana courts or if it ever has a way to wind up to the Supreme Court. This makeup of the Supreme Court is different. And I'll call them holy rollers because that's who they are. There are a lot of very staunch Catholics now sitting on the Supreme Court. So I guess the question is, do they take into consideration the law, or does their religion become more important to them?
Well, when JFK was running back in 1960, and I've read about this, I wasn't looking at the newspaper in 1960, not that early in life anyway. But the argument was that JFK, wouldn't be the president of the American people. He'd be the president of the Pope. And you sort of laugh at that, and JFK won, and we didn't become, governed by the Pope in this country. But after Alito wrote the Dobbs decision, he and his wife, who's become incredibly controversial now with her flags, they went and did a victory lap in Rome and showed off for the Pope. Presumably because this was so in keeping with Catholic dogma, although in my opinion, Dobbs was not in keeping with our U.S. Constitution or 50 years of precedent after after Roe v. Wade. So, go and figure. But, there are bridges too far even for this U.S. Supreme Court. And we're seeing that with the cases that are coming down. And that's just a bridge too far. You cannot post the 10 Commandments and say it's merely of historical significance and just so happens to also be the tenets of a particular majority faith in this country. We don't care whether the majority or the minority faith. You don't impose your religious views on other people in public forums. In private and religious forums, totally different story. But that's the classic, public forum, the schools. And it's not just the university where people could sort of roll their eyes and say, oh my God, the Republican governor of this state, how stupid does he think he is, spending his money losing to the ACLU instead of helping people in the state? University student at, LSU can roll their eyes. But, this is a first grader. This is a second grader. And as I said, people would howl if it were the Quran that was going up in every first and second grade public school classroom in Louisiana.
Absolutely. Let's move to the story about Roger Stone. And he was secretly recorded. There's this audio tape of him, and they're talking about, I don't know, how to flip the election should it not go their way this time. And he said, we made no preparations last time. None of the Trump, he said that now they're on offensive footing, is what he said. And in this case, he said, he was asked what would prevent voter fraud, and he said, in some states it'll be easier to stop, in other places it won't. But at least this time when they do it, you have a lawyer and a judge, his home phone number, standing by so you can stop it. He said, we made no preparations last time, none. And this time they're ready with, I guess, lawyers and judges. What does that mean? I mean, I guess, what are lawyers and judges going to do? Are they going to stop what is a rightful election just because Roger Stone says no?
You know, Kim, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And Stone, if he's right twice a day, it seems to be completely by accident. He seems to go out of his way to say things that are outrageous, that are untrue. You know, he's been indicted, he's been either pardoned or commuted, but he never had to serve any time, although he was, duly convicted and duly charged, at least in the courts. The point that he's making is completely irrelevant. Yes, there are judges and lawyers who stand by. They're very normal. I did that one year for Clinton Gore. And if there was an issue that came up when Clinton Gore ran in '92, I was a lawyer answering the phone and saying, oh, you should go and keep the polls open for 2 hours longer. You go ask the judge for that. Trying to, plan the election day strategy. Let's say somebody showed up and not only electioneered at the polls illegally. Who do you call? What do you do about it? But suppose they did something even more drastic. Like one of the things was they dressed up like immigration officers and just stood there. The idea is that would intimidate some Hispanic voters just to have, these stooges standing there dressed as immigration officers, though they weren't. It was just it was just a thing to wear. So I'm very familiar with the fact that there are lawyers standing by. There's usually an emergency judge. You'll hear sometimes that the lines are 5 hours long and that some judge has decided to keep the polls open 2 hours longer. So these are the lawyers who stand by on election day to do those things. There are judges who stand by and have to issue injunctions so that the election laws are followed on election day. Now, of course, before that, there's a huge legal effort that goes into elections on both sides. The idea that Trump was the incumbent and had loads and loads of lawyers, he didn't do anything to prepare for what might happen on election day. It's just more of the stories that Stone tells. They had huge preparations. Some of the things that they've been indicted for are things that they did not only before election day, but after election day. There's been all kinds of alleged misconduct by the Trump campaign in 2020 before election day. And of course, it's really notorious the things they did after election day. Stone is just, to the extent there's any point to what Stone is saying, yes, the Trump campaign will get ready both before, on, and after election day to challenge what they don't like. And President Biden will do the same thing. This is just normal.
This is the way we work, huh?
This is the way we work. And remember, you have to go to a court and complain to the courts. When they went to the courts and complained, Giuliani, Sidney Powell, that whole gang, they lost, 60 out of 60 lawsuits. I think They got some tiny procedural advantage in one case, but they lost 60 out of 60 cases on the substance of everything that they were complaining about, claiming it was a big steal and everything else. They lost all those lawsuits. Remember, they asked Giuliani famously, do you have any evidence? And he was like in court, evidence? Oh, Your Honor, what evidence? What a shock. Evidence. Not just the rhetoric that I spew for the cameras outside. Your Honor wanted some evidence.
Let's move to the Supreme Court. We've got some opinions still set to come out, and among them, the ruling on the presidential immunity. And I don't know when exactly they plan to make this ruling, but we're all just kind of waiting. We've got cases on hold pending against Trump because we don't know. And then we also have the obstruction of justice charges pending against the January 6th rioters. So any opinions on maybe what the Supreme Court will decide and when?
There may be more heat wave, Kim. There may be an earthquake. I don't know. But what I can confidently predict is that before July 4th, the Supreme Court calls it a day. They do not sit after July 4th. So before July 4th, which is imminent, they will decide all of these major cases, and the ones that we're waiting for, because I was just on a show yesterday. And this is why people like me on shows, because
I love you on shows. I love you on this show.
I analyze the cases as best I can.
Yeah.
And then I try to give you my best prediction, which is what lawyers do. Lawyers, when they sit around their office and analyze these things, try awfully hard to figure out how a case is going to be decided. I mean, stocks move on how cases are decided. Huge events move on them, and you make your most educated guess. And there are people who they do it more than I do. They follow the Supreme Court even more than I do. And they guess this is going to be 5-4. They guess which justice is going to be on which side. And so I was amused yesterday because in about 8 minutes, I predicted 4 of the U.S. Supreme Court cases, how they would come out. And then they had a very esteemed professor from a very famous university to talk about one of those 4 cases. He refused to take any opinion whatsoever how it was going to come out. Come on, people want Katsadamas.
Clearly, yeah, he doesn't know Katsadamas. That's what we can tell him. Yeah.
Right? Okay. So I think that the way presidential immunity is going to come out, and it'll come out in the next week or 10 days, the way that case is going to come out is they're going to send it back, and they're going to say the trial judge, that's Judge Chutkan in Washington, D.C. federal court, that she's going to have to decide after hearing a lot of arguments and maybe some evidence, like an evidentiary hearing. She'll have to decide what are the president's official acts, any president's official acts, and what are private acts. Let me give you an example. Giuliani and other people like that didn't even work for the government. I think going to be easy to say that things that Trump told Giuliani to do and things that sort of didn't seem to sort of fit within what a president normally does day in and day out, that those things will be private. Those things can be prosecuted. Doesn't mean Trump's guilty of any of them, but it means that he can be prosecuted for them. The case can go on, and they can try to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed violations that are in the area, Kim, of his private conduct. Now, the classic official act is that, let's say the president signed some bill, and the bill ended up having 500,000 people detained in detention camps pending deportation, deported them, didn't grant amnesty applications that people thought should have been granted under the law. Those are official acts. To the extent the president is being, or like they say, well, what goes around comes around, so Biden could be prosecuted for things like that. Those are official acts. And maybe the one that people can understand the best is, let's say there's an American citizen abroad who's spewing out, hateful, anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-everything propaganda, which in the president and his advisors' judgments is causing people to commit terrorist acts against the United States abroad. The president orders the killing of that person, okay? There's certainly an argument that that is an official act, abhorrent to some people, but an official act. How about killing a political rival here in the United States? That would hit most people as that cannot be an official act. Even if it was done through the attorney general or somebody who worked in the White House, who got a government salary, it's still not an official act. But, the idea is to draw that line, and Chutkan will put on one side the things that the president is charged with and can be prosecuted for in the Washington, D.C. This is the insurrection case, January 6th. And those things leading up to it, let's say the slates or not tamping it down while it happened, sending the incendiary message about Pence, even while it was going on in the Capitol, the marauding and the threatening, and put one in one column and one in the other column and say, okay, we are going to trial on the ones in this column, the ones that are private or non-official prosecutable acts. And guess what? Trump will say she did it all wrong. She disregarded my arguments. What she lumped in the area that I can be prosecuted for are official acts. A president has immunity from all of that. And that's why it is almost certainly going to go back to the U.S. Supreme Court a second time around, sometime in 2025. And everyone who's looked at this has said Trump did come up with a strategy with the help of his friends on the U.S. Supreme Court who have kicked this can down the road to avoid him going to trial in November before the election. That just seems inevitable. Well, the one thing, Kim, is that there may be an evidentiary hearing, and that evidentiary hearing may be bad. For they may give immunity to people like Meadows, call witnesses like Cassie Hutchinson. And those evidentiary hearings, when reported in the late summer and fall, may have the same impact on Trump falling off in the polls the way a trial might have resulted in him falling off in the polls. It'll bring back to life for people all of the awful things that, in my opinion, he did beyond a reasonable doubt and that are criminal. Encouraging that riot at the Capitol, leading the people to go there, not tamping it down while it was going on, the phony slates that were in place to go instead of the real slates. That whole bunch of conduct, to me, was not shepherding the election to make sure it was honest, which is what he'll argue, but election interference in Trump's favorite term, but his projection. He charges Biden with it and the courts with it. That's what Trump did. He interfered with the election. He interfered with the peaceful transfer of power. And to me, that is something that is absolutely prosecutable. But we'll see what the judge says, and we'll see then again what the U.S. Supreme Court says next time. But that's where I think this case is headed. People say if they just wanted to affirm the D.C. Circuit, which ruled 3-0, that what Trump's charged with right now, he could be prosecuted for all of it. Okay, they wouldn't have taken the case. They would have just not taken the case. That ruling would have stood 6 months ago. So they took the case so they could monkey around with it, and delay it. And I think in the way that I just predicted.
It's so frustrating as a citizen and a voter to have the will of the voters thwarted in this way, to have this slate of false electors, to have this outright cheating, and to still have this playing out in the courts. It feels like this should have been dealt with so much faster. And I know Marcus said this before.
I was just going to say,
Merrick Garland has dragged his heels, but it's, you say that we're going to have, this is going to go back and forth with the courts, and we're going to see that the Supreme Court gets it again. And the can isn't just kicked down the road. It's like kicked into another state. And so how long does this take? And when do the American people feel like we finally have justice on this? Because this is affecting every single voter in America. They tried to steal an election.
Well, we saw a lot of it. The whole world saw it on TV. I mean, we saw the incendiary speech that Trump gave. We knew that he had not wanted to have people searched for weapons because he said, they're my people, don't search them. We know that once the riot started and they breached the lines, instead of tamping it down, we know that for hours and hours, Trump just let it play out. We know that General Flynn's brother somehow answered the phone at the Pentagon and didn't call the National Guard out very fast. We know that while that was going on, Trump sent out the incendiary message that didn't tamp down the threats against Pence, but actually exacerbated them. And we know that there was no action for about 3.5 or 4 hours by Trump of any significance because he was hoping it would play out to his favor and they would indeed thwart the peaceful transfer of power. And you remember they're going to get Pence out of there. Pence was the hero of this story that day because he wouldn't leave the Capitol. If he was, they probably would have put the most senior Republican like Grassley in charge. Grassley would have done exactly Trump's bidding. He would have sent the thing back to the state. They wouldn't have voted that night. And then they would have started all of the mischief trying to get, Alito and Thomas and other justices on the Supreme Court to somehow grant them relief, which it looked like 2 or 3 of them were willing to grant relief to President Trump. So, yes, it's extremely frustrating. And that's why some people say, we knew all of that. Couldn't Merrick Garland have appointed a special prosecutor without having Cassie Hutchinson? She was so critical to this. We had everything else and a whole lot more of it. Appoint the special prosecutor then. And, it's not, in some sense, it's not Merrick Garland's fault. It's really Trump's fault and Trump's followers and true believers' fault because they pressed it to those limits. And one day history will obviously have a pretty definitive judgment on, why Merrick Garland didn't do it. I'm sure that he would say that he didn't want this to look like a banana republic. But to me, we look more like a banana republic to be where we are right now with justices, cherry picked by Trump. I mean, history will certainly say that, to do his bidding, to vote in his favor. And they've acted so much in his favor. You remember how hard it was to get a hold of his tax returns? 2 years he managed to get 2 trips to the U.S. Supreme Court before we got his tax returns. So I think that, of course, I guess so many people think now that Merrick Garland should have appointed a special prosecutor, because Jack Smith moved on this January 6th quite quickly, but he couldn't move on it before he was appointed. And he wasn't appointed for over 2 years after Biden and Garland took office.
What do you think about the January 6th rioters case, this obstruction of justice charge? I think you may have commented on it before, but I'd like to hear what you think with the decision looming ahead of us.
I have a feeling that one will go the rioters' way, if you want to call it that. It's a very open-ended statute. It just says, like, you shouldn't obstruct. And to say that alone is enough to prosecute somebody. They gave the example during the oral argument before the Supreme Court that if in the middle of the oral argument in the Supreme Court about this obstruction of justice, someone had stood up and started screaming, and as soon as they cleared them out of there, someone else started screaming. And the result was that they delayed the Supreme Court argument for 5 or 6 hours as they delayed the certification at the Capitol for 5 or 6 hours or a day, most of the day, by their conduct. Would all of those people who jumped up in the U.S. Supreme Court courtroom have been prosecutable under this vague obstruction of justice statute? And they may say that it's simply too vague, that criminal statutes have to be very specific so people can guide their conduct, not commit federal felonies at their peril under a vague statute. There are only about, I think, 50 or 60 people who were only prosecuted under the obstruction of justice. If they were prosecuted for trespassing or failing to obey an order or assaulting one of the officers there at the Capitol, those convictions would all be good. But the person who was only prosecuted under this vague obstruction statute only, they would have their case thrown out if they properly preserved the issue in court, which I think most of them did. As to Trump himself, he's charged with 4 counts. 2 of them are those vague obstruction counts. So even if Trump's 2 vague obstruction counts were thrown out, he still has 2 very live felony counts against him for the insurrection. So that's how I think that one's going to come out. But people will howl that anybody will get off. And they'll yell at the prosecutors, why did they only charge them with that 1 count? And, there were 1,000 people plus that they were prosecuting. I know I always look like I'm standing up for my old friends in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Actually, usually as a criminal defense attorney, I pick many bones with them in how they proceed in their cases. But I think that's how that one's going to come out. I'm not sure. The other one I predicted was a really fascinating case, which is the Rahimi case. The Rahimi case, we're not exactly sure how that one is going to come out, but that's the domestic violence. There's a restraining order in a domestic violence case, and the judge said, okay, now I've heard the evidence. I've heard it's often a woman, so let's say the woman who says that she's being stalked and menaced, and she wants a restraining order and says, my husband or my boyfriend has a gun. And the judge says, well, you're not allowed to have the gun anymore. You've got to turn it in during the time that this restraining order is in effect. Believe it or not, that case is in the U.S. Supreme Court on the argument that the Second Amendment gives that person, that alleged stalker, the right to continue to keep and bear arms, even while under a restraining order. That, I think, is another bridge too far, even for this U.S. Supreme Court. I expect Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch to think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. This is the historical import at the time of the revolution. Judges during the revolution were not issuing restraining orders in domestic violence cases. So there's not a historical precedent. And it's like, is there something wrong with you people? You don't have to take everything by what happened in 1770, whatever. Come on. The law evolves in certain, intelligent ways, Kim, right? And I think that the other 6 will say, this is not a bridge too far. This has been adjudicated by a judge. The judge has ruled that a restraining order should be in place. And having decided that, the judge can go on to rule, and while my restraining order is in place, you, the defendant, you, the accused, cannot have a firearm during that period of time. I think that'll be the ruling. But a lot of people that's the one that the university professor wouldn't predict. So I'm predicting it.
It seems like common sense to me, right?
6-3. Well, it's common to 6 of them. The other three seem to get, they have this extreme historical analysis. Amy Coney Barrett just called out Thomas for this extreme historical focus that she said, the forest for the trees.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too. And even she's saying, you got to let go of history a little bit here.
Well, Thomas would say, what do you mean, miss the forest for the trees? Well, I'm driving that huge
mega mansion house bus. Yeah.
I never had to pay it back for. I don't miss the forest for the trees. No, it's a metaphor. Clarence Thomas, it's a metaphor. Have you seen the chart where it shows all the gifts that U.S. Supreme Court justices have gotten? And it's a tiny little bottom of the graph. And then you see the graph that shows what Thomas got. And Thomas's gifts, like they dwarf everybody else's put together.
Wow.
And he forgot to list 3 of them because it's so easy to forget a trip halfway around the world on somebody's private plane and yacht. So easy to forget them. Even once he had to make the disclosure late, he missed 3 of them. You know what they would do to a lawyer? You know what they would do to any lawyer in America if you certified something and you missed 3 really important things on your late certification? It's unbelievable it's unbelievable that the conservatives, that anybody puts up with Clarence Thomas. I think that if Trump wins again, God forbid, I think that they really are going to make an overture to get rid of Thomas. I think he's just too much of an embarrassment. And they'll put a younger super right winger on there. If they have 51 senators, the Republicans, which I hope people are thinking about the Senate race, not just the presidency, and what party they want to have in control of the Senate going forward. It's so important to the country.
It's interesting that you bring up the makeup of the court, because just a couple of days ago, President Biden said that this is of huge importance. He said the next president will likely have to make a decision on 2 U.S. Supreme Court nominees. Who do you think is leaving? And do you think it will be 2?
That's interesting. I guess that was with the assumption that Trump wins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And which 2? I think logically one of them would be Thomas. And I really don't have a clear idea. I mean, 3 of them just got recently appointed.
Right.
Roberts. I don't agree with Roberts all the time. I had the pleasure to meet him one time. He heard a eulogy that I gave for the U.S. District Judge that I clerked for when my judge passed away some years ago in Washington, D.C. And he came to the eulogy, and he just made an extraordinarily positive impression as a person. And I've certainly agreed with his jurisprudence a lot more than the other 5 Republicans on the court. But I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't really see any reason why he would. So I guess the best guess, I guess, would be Alito, that maybe Alito wants to do other things. And his wife made that kind of mysterious remark that, when I can, I'm going to sue all these people who defame me within the statute of limitations. And so people have said, well, maybe she knows something or revealed something in that undercover tape that they made of her. And I have to laugh when the Alitos scream about undercover tapes, because I don't think that Alito himself ever saw a criminal case where he minded the sting. If you were nobody, a schlepper, and somebody wore a wire on you, Alito thought that was the greatest thing in the world, that they wore a wire on the schlepper alleged criminal. So, right? What's good for my policy may not be good for me and my wife.
Exactly.
He actually does to me what I say is fine to do to other people. I think that's called hypocrisy, right?
Do we really see Clarence Thomas stepping down? I mean, here's a guy who won't recuse himself when it seems like pretty obvious that you have a connection or a bias to a case, and he won't recuse. Do you think he might be too addicted to the power and the free gifts to check out of the court?
Well, I have a very low opinion of him, so I think that he would get some big gift before he left. I think that
a payout on the way out the door.
Yeah, he'd get a house. He'd get something like that. My great respect. And there's nothing you could really do. I mean, if he got a $5 million house while he was leaving, I mean, he might have to pay taxes on it, depending how it was structured. But I think, someone could get on your show and tell me I'm wrong, but I think that he's leaving. That what's his name, Crow, gives him a $5 million house. They have so much in common. They asked Crow, they said, it's kind of interesting because you never studied law. What do you and Clarence Thomas really have in common? And I think he said, we're about the same age. So that's something. That's something. In America, I had things in common with Kim. Kim, think about it. You have millions and millions of people that you love to talk to and hang out with because you share so much with them. They're about the same age as you.
It's crazy. I don't know. I think they'll have a hard time prying him off of that court. He might be one of those, who has to die on the court.
$7 million.
By the way, I'm not advocating danger. I just mean of old age. Like he's, yeah.
$7 million house. Do I see your?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're doing here. All right, yeah.
A new RV.
It's a possibility that he'll take the stuff and go. Like The Price is Right on the Supreme Court.
I mean, it's really a terrible situation because we should revere our Supreme Court justices. That's kind of the attitude I have toward Chief Justice Roberts. You know, I was in the old days when they were nominating Kavanaugh, picking Kavanaugh. Actually, a Laura Ingraham's show had me on 4 times. And the show was kind of interested, as far right-wing as it is. They were kind of interested whether they were doing the right thing with Kavanaugh. The idea was, do they drop Kavanaugh? Is Kavanaugh going to waste 3 or 4 months of our time and then eventually lose? Because that happened with Nixon. You know, 2 of Nixon's nominees to the U.S. Supreme Court lost. They wasted a lot of time. Bork lost, and they ended up with Kennedy. So they were kind of interested, are we going to lose this one? And so they wanted a different opinion, like mine. And so that was a time when there was actually some interest in that, in that subject. But then they lost interest. They decided to go with Kavanaugh, and Kavanaugh, ended up making it. And Kavanaugh, there certainly was a lot of controversy, Kim, about him coming on the court. But he's been sort of the middle. I mean, on these cases, when you see that there's some chance, like you look at the ones coming up right now. You kind of look at Kavanaugh, Roberts, and Barrett. I mean, the other 3, Gorsuch, they just lost Gorsuch's vote today. There's kind of a boring case. It's almost as boring as income tax was in law school. So I won't have everyone's eyes glaze over. But it was kind of an important decision today. It ended up going 7-2 in favor of the government, that they could collect these taxes. It would have cost the federal government billions of dollars in taxes if the case had gone the other way. And it turned out that Thomas and Gorsuch were the ones who would have made that ruling that would have cost the government billions and billions of dollars. Even Alito didn't get on that train.
You're talking about the ruling where Americans hide their funds in overseas so they don't have to pay taxes on it. That's basically the case.
Kim, they fairly legally hide their taxes overseas because they never realize any income. And so there's an income tax. They had to pass the 16th Amendment to the Constitution for there to be an income tax. So the argument is that an unrealized gain is not income. This will be a huge issue if the government ever imposes a wealth tax. So the guy who doesn't have income, but the guy who has a $2 billion property, and they put a wealth tax on him because he's the owner of a $2 billion property, this issue will be huge. And the majority actually is written by Kavanaugh today. He said this is a very narrow ruling. And then Thomas and Gorsuch in dissent said, well, it's not that narrow if you don't have to realize the income, if it's just that your stock value went up, and they can tax that once. Well, I know it's an unusual situation. It was actually under Trump, because Trump wanted to lower taxes so much, Kim, on the very, very wealthy. They had to do something as a sop to offset it. So they offset it with this provision. But the 2 of them said, even this is too far, Kim. Even this is too far. And it would have cost the government billions and billions of dollars had they ruled the other way. And Gorsuch was willing. I mean, talk about the whatever, like, in my opinion, crazy libertarian. I mean, if you want to be a crazy libertarian, you got to balance the budget. Explain how you're going to balance the budget. Don't just get up there like Gorsuch and cost the government billions and billions of dollars, and say, and at least philosophically say you're a libertarian. You got to cut some spending there too. You want to make things come out if you're going to cost it anyway. 7 of them wouldn't have done that. 7 of them wouldn't have done it. And Kavanaugh does it. The things that end up going 5-4, the way that I usually agree with them going, you almost have to have Kavanaugh's vote as well as Roberts to go 5-4.
I'm coming to the end of my allotted David Katz time, I understand. However, a story just popped up about, and it's a New York Times story that says 2 federal judges urged Eileen Cannon to step down from the Trump case. One of them was the district's chief judge, Cecilia Altanaga. She suggested that Cannon decline to oversee the case brought by special counsel Jack Smith and allow another judge to oversee it instead. So you have 2 2 federal judges in South Florida saying, Cannon, you shouldn't do this. And she still oversees the case.
You know, one of the delightful and mischievous things about you, Kim, is you love to play Stump the Cats. But I happened to hear that story on the radio as I came over. So you didn't catch me 100% unawares, which is the real fun. You know, the thing about federal judges that we really have, we have kings and queens. We have gods and goddesses in our time. They walk among us. They have black robes on, and they're called United States District Judges. And once the case goes to United States District Judge, there's really not much that anyone else on the same court can do. There's something called related cases. So if this case had also gone to Judge Smith and gone to Cannon, there would have been a form, and both Smith and Cannon, the government would have said, this case ought to go to you, Judge Smith, because you know more about it, or you, Cannon, because you know more about it. But this particular case had gone to Cannon, and it had gone to a magistrate judge. They're at a lower rank, the magistrate judges. So in any dispute between a magistrate judge and a district judge, the district judge will prevail. This is why people have sort of questioned the judgment of Jack Smith in bringing that Mar-a-Lago case, which is such a slam dunk and which ought to have gone to trial quickly, to have brought it in that district, because he had a 1 in 3 chance under their rules that it would go to her, and it did go to her. Now, at that point, of course, there's suasion that the chief judge can say, you know, I really think based on my experience and so forth, you don't want the optics of this case going to you. You've been overruled by the 11th Circuit twice already when you butted into the magistrate judge's decisions about the search of Mar-a-Lago. You appointed a special master. You didn't let the FBI look at these documents, which they needed to look at right away just for national security purposes. You were overruled twice by a very conservative circuit on egregious rulings of yours, Judge Cannon. Maybe the better part of valor is to avoid the optics. And she said, I don't want to avoid the optics. Yeah. So at that point, there was nothing, chief judge, schmief judge, there was nothing that chief judge down there could do. The other judge who gave her some avuncular advice, there was nothing that Uncle Judge could do. And, she could have gone down the hall. There's nothing wrong with that. And every time she got an interesting motion that she didn't really know about, gone down and asked one of the more senior judges. There's no reason that they can't do that. My judge was a very experienced judge in Washington, D.C., but they had lunch together. I'm sure that he asked other judges their opinion about some interesting stuff. None of it bound him. And if she decided not to go down there and ask advice all the time and take their advice, that was on Cannon. So I think the only way that, at some point she'll make some ruling and Jack Smith will say, okay, this is the beach I'm willing to risk dying on. Yep. And he will piss her off even more than she's apparently pissed off with the government. And, people think, let's not be naive that she sees herself as Justice Cannon in the restoration of Trump. Who's in a better position than her? And, Trump loves that sort of loyalty thing, reward her. And if there's 52 senators who are Republicans, why wouldn't they reward her? They stopped Merrick Garland, right? Why wouldn't they reward Cannon? So, you can say that it's nothing but crass self-interest on her part. And whether she's one of those goddesses that we put up on this Mount Olympus of the federal courts or not, she could be acting out of total self-interest. Anyway, unless some higher court like the 11th Circuit removes her. Now, if there's an appeal, they can say, you know what, we not only grant this appeal by Jack Smith, but we think it would be better to have a different judge. We'll appoint a different judge at random. That the higher court could do. But she seems to have been very savvy in sort of delaying things, but not made a ruling that, she's sort of sat on the case. People say that she's really sat on the case. And, they've even said that it's kind of devious. I mean, words like that should never be applied to a federal judge. I don't think anyone ever applied that to my judge about any ruling or anything that he did. But this one really has a bad odor to it, Cannon and Trump. But here we are.
Last question from Gordon, who writes, could the Florida document case be transferred to the federal D.C. court?
Well, one of the interesting things is, and it's really too late. It's too late for it to make a difference. It's too late for it to go to trial before the November. And people might say, well, Pat, you're just a partisan. You want it to go to trial before the November election because it's going to hurt Trump. What I'm saying is that this case all by itself, if it were anyone else, it might actually take that long to get to trial past November. There is a huge public interest in the public knowing with Trump, is he guilty or is he not guilty? There's a huge public interest that does not, if the case involved, even some prominent person, let's assume it involved Elon Musk. Let's assume it involved somebody else prominent like that. And the case took 2 years to go to trial. And people said, well, people ought to know whether Musk is convicted or not. Yeah, that would be some public interest. But the public interest here is so intense because there's about to be an election in November for president, right? So there is a huge public interest in this case that's not present in other cases. There just is. And that, to my mind, makes it different. Now, if you just say theoretically, hypothetically, I suppose that if there are documents, let's say in New Jersey, Smith could charge Trump in New Jersey and say that you also obstructed justice by taking documents and keeping them there. We asked for the documents that were in New Jersey at your club there. You didn't turn those over. You BS'd us about them. But oh my God, politically, first of all, that trial would never go to trial before November. And can you imagine the political reaction when Jack Smith says basically, okay, you're delaying. We're going to file a new case. And we're going to move that one forward. Yeah, slow it down as much as you want to, Judge Cannon, because we're already bringing a case in.
We're moving on without you, yeah.
We're moving on without you in New Jersey. We're moving on without you in Washington, D.C. And whatever strategic, practical aspect that would have had at one time, it wouldn't have any now. It would just be a talking point for Trump, how much they want to get him. It wouldn't make any sense. This case is not going to trial. This whole Mar-a-Lago thing, this whole taking the documents, and Mark and I talked about this, I think, with you many times, that he took them from Washington, D.C., and then he got subpoenas and other requests to turn them over from Washington, D.C. He knew very well he was obstructing justice in Washington, D.C. with this conduct. There was perfectly good venue. It could have gone there. I think a little bit was Jack Smith was kind of showing off that the evidence is so strong, I can convict you anywhere. And guess what? In front of a Trump-picked judge, in front of her, in front of that judge in Amarillo, Texas, with a medical abortion pill. No, and it may be true that in a jury, like in Manhattan, you could get a fair jury, and probably down there in West Palm Beach or whatever, it's Fort Pierce, you could get a fair jury. But believe it or not, you have to get by a judge, and you have to have an unbiased judge, which we have almost everywhere in every district in America, and people are really questioning if we have it with Cannon down there in Fort Pierce, Florida.
David Katz, we all look forward to David Katz Day on the Mark Thompson Show every week. Thank you so much for your time and for being here. You're awesome.
I love being with you, Kim, and my condolences to Mark, of course.
Thank you. I'll pass that on. I appreciate it. I'll see you next week, sir.
Great. Take care.
Bye. David Katz, everybody. Katzadamus has spoken. This is the way it shall be. Well, we have just about come to the end of the Mark Thompson Show. Please click the like button. Please click the subscribe button if you haven't already. Hi, Albert. And if you would like to support the show,
with your iron rod.
Oh, smash it indeed. And if you'd like to support the show, you can find us at themarkthompsonshow.com. The Patreon link, the PayPal links, all there. Of course, this show is crowdfunded, and we can't tell you how much we appreciate your support and helping keep this show on YouTube and podcast and various other places. So themarkthompsonshow.com. Thank you for being here. We've got a big show tomorrow too. Of course, it is Friday, and that means Friday Fabulous Florida, and Albert is already hard at work putting together something that might include alligators, possibly machetes, maybe methamphetamines. We'll see how it goes. And I believe Michael Schur will be on the show as well to talk some politics. And then we have, what else on Friday?
Michael Snyder, the Culture Blast.
Michael Snyder, how do I forget this? Yeah, we'll do movie reviews with Michael Snyder. We'll talk pop culture and some sports and music and all kinds of other things. So Michael Schur, Michael Snyder, Friday Fabulous Florida. It's a Friday show that you don't want to miss. I am next on the After Party Live, so if you haven't seen the show, please go on over, click subscribe there as well. And today we're talking about some fun things, and we have Trivia Thursday, so that'll be good.
Trivia
right.
Thursday.
Wow. I know. You should come play.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. We'll see y'all tomorrow. I appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.